So this is our last lesson of the year, and this is a lot of stuff to be reading, a lot of stuff here. If we look at these, I'm going to kind of try and pick and choose here, the rest of the stuff you can read. These two equations right there are the equations we looked at the other day, right? Right here. What is different about them today? There was a B before, because that's how you found your period. A was your amplitude. What's different? There's a K value. Do you remember our old friends H and K?
Yeah, I didn't like them.
Okay, there was H and K. We are only discussing K. We are not discussing H. In pre-calc, you will discuss H, but we're not going to do those here. H was a horizontal shift. In trigonometry, it's called a phase shift, and it's just a little more complex than we need to go this year. But K is a vertical shift, which means we're going to take our graphs that we did the past couple days, and we are going to shift them either up or down. Okay? So I'm going to need to introduce a new word. Let's see, does she have this word here? I don't know if I see it. The word that we're looking at is called a midline. And if you had to guess what the definition of a midline is, what would you say it is? Exactly. You guys are brilliant. Okay. So a midline is a line that goes in the middle. Now I will say this. Every graph that we did up until now, the midline has been on the x-axis. The midline has been right here. We are now moving that midline depending on what our K value is. So, in the past, our K value has always been 0 because it hasn't existed, which is why our midline was right there. In this particular problem, where is my midline? It's going to be at 1 because that is where my K value is. So, I'm going to go ahead and draw that midline in. On your test, on your group test and everything, I expect to see that midline drawn in. I appreciate even when it's drawn in when it's at 0. Just so that way I know that you were thinking about that and you took that into account. Okay? What other kinds of things do I need to know? I need to know my amplitude. What's my amplitude for this problem? 3. What is the period? If we are doing the period in radians, it would be 2 pi over what? B, what's the B value? 1. 2 pi over 1 is 2 pi. Questions about that so far? All right. So I'm going to label your x-axis, not your midline. This is 2 pi. Oh, hang on. I think I got an extra line. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the 4th line out. Always, that's your period right there. Now I find the halfway point. What's halfway from 0 to 2 pi? Pi. What's halfway from 0 to pi? Pi over 2. And what's halfway between pi and 2 pi? 3 pi over 2. Okay? We will talk domain. We will talk range. Actually, let's talk domain now. What's my domain going to be? All real numbers. So all I'm doing is I am taking the graph that we would have done before, and in this case I am shifting it up 1. Now here's the tricky part. When my amplitude is 3, I am no longer going from positive 3 to negative 3. I am going 3 above this line and 3 below this line. So if this line is at 1, what is my maximum going to be? 4, because that's 3 above the line. What's 3 below the line? Negative 2. So the points I need to label are negative 2. You should label your midline at 1 and 4. Does that make sense? It's not going just from 3 to negative 3 anymore because we're shifting it up. It's going from whatever 3 above that midline is to whatever 3 below that midline is. Okay? Now, this is a sine graph. So is it Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the other one? the other one. Middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. Now, middle is no longer on the x-axis. Middle is at the midline. So middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. And again, go a little bit through your endpoints. And that's what my graph looks like. Now my range has changed. My range is not from -3 to 3. What is it from? -2 to 4. Not too bad? That's the only thing we're doing today. Other than the whole writing the equation from the picture. We'll do that too. Just to summarize the notes from the other day, from 19.1b, I believe it was, what would happen if that 3 was negative in front? If that 3 was negative, my amplitude is still positive 3, because my amplitude has to be positive. But what would a negative sign make me do? It takes your pattern and it changes all your tops to bottoms and your bottoms to tops. That's it. That's the only difference. Okay? All right, let's look at this guy. Amplitude, period, domain, range. All right, what's the amplitude here? 1. Right? No number in front of cosine, therefore my amplitude is 1. Where's my midline? -3. So if I'm counting by ones, my midline is down there. So label your midline. And then also, from that midline, where am I going to be going? Up 1, which gets me to -2, and down 1, which gets me to what? -4. So what does that mean about my range? My range is going to be -4 to -2. Does that make sense? Domain is still all real numbers. Period, if we're doing degrees, I have to do 360 divided by what? 1/4. What is 360 divided by 1/4? I don't know where my calculator is. Let me just verify. 360 divided by 1/4, 1440. So again, she gave us 5 lines out, but it's the 4th line out always that you're going with. So 1440. What would be halfway? 720. And halfway again, 360. So we're counting by 360s. So what's that last one? 1080. Okay. Now I was kind of dumb and I labeled them down there. I should have labeled them on the x-axis. Doesn't matter where I label them really. But if I had labeled them up here, that would have been nicer because why? It would be out of the way of my graph and my curve would be clearer. Okay? So try to not do what I just did there and label on the x-axis instead of on your... I won't mark down. It just makes it harder for me to read it. So, do I have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles graph or the other one? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. TMBMT. If it was negative, it would be BMTMB. Your tops would become bottoms, your bottoms would become tops. So, where is my top now? My top is at -2. Middle, bottom, middle, top. Again, hook those top ones around. You are not going through those points and continuing up. It would curve back down to make another U shape. Yes?
For the negative on the sign, is it middle, bottom, middle, top?
Yes. If you had a negative over here, it would be middle, bottom, middle, top, middle. You just changed the T's and the B's. Okay? Questions there? Okay, let's turn the page. All right, I'm not going to do all these, I don't think. I think I might skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to do these two. And if I have time, I'll do this guy. So let's start right here. This one is written a little bit backwards. Do you see that? Do you see that it's written a little bit backwards? What I need to read this as is I need to read this as negative 4 sine theta over 2 plus 2. That's what I need to read it as. So, there's no graph provided, so I'm going to have to draw a graph. Bummer. Where's my k value at?
2.
2. So, when I go up 2, here we go. Boom. So I label my midline. Where am I going to have to go from there? What's my amplitude? My amplitude is 4. So I need to go 4 above there, which I didn't space very well, which is up here at 6, isn't it? So we're going to pretend like you can see that that's at 6. What's 4 below there? Negative 2. And how many little dash marks do I need on my x-axis? 4. Let's find our period. Our period is in degrees, so I have 360 over what? 1/2, which is 720. So 720 out here. What's half of 720? 360. What's half of 360? 180. And then you can either take that and multiply it by 3 to get this guy, or you can add those two and divide by 2 to get that guy. Either way, what does this guy end up being? 540. So, is this a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the other one? The other one, which is middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. However, we had a negative sign at front. So we're not going to graph it as middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. We're going to graph middle, bottom, middle, top, middle. We're going to change those T's to B's and the B's to T's. Ready? Middle, bottom, middle, top, middle. And we should look something like that. Questions there? Yes? No? Good answer. Domain, what's my domain here? All real numbers. What's my range? Negative 2 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to what? 6. Okay. All right, let's graph this guy. Now this one's a little different. It says to graph 2 periods, which means 2 of these things, 2 cycles. Okay, so I'll show you how that works. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We have amplitude is what? 1. Period. If we're doing radians, it would be 2 pi over what? 1/3. What's 2 divided by 1/3? 6 pi. Do I have a k value? I do not have a k value. Now I'm making my x-axis a little bit longer because I need to graph 2 pi, or 2 periods, I should say. I'm going to go ahead and draw my midline in, but my midline is just going to be at the x-axis because I have no k value. I'm going to go up to 1 and down to negative 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 marks out there. This is 6 pi, correct? Everything up to now should be decent, yeah? Get it? So 6 pi, this would be 3 pi. What would this be? 3 pi over 2? What's halfway from 3 pi to 6 pi? 3 plus 6 divided by 2 is 4.5, which as a fraction, as an improper fraction, we would call 9 pi over 2. That's kind of ugly. On the test, I try and leave it with reasonable breakups there so it's not crazy. Now, what you're going to do for 2 periods is this. You're going to draw 4 more little tick marks there. If this is 6 pi, what's the next one going to be? 12 pi. The one in the middle would be 9 pi, right? 6, 9, 12. And you don't need to worry about those other 2. They're going to be ugly fractions, okay? If it's reasonable, like it's 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi, 8 pi, you can just continue on and it's easy. Those 2, I'm not going to worry about you labeling though, okay? All right, so we have cosine. What kind of graph is that? Is that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the other one? It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So let me think about this for a minute. Top, middle, bottom, middle, top. But what do I need to do? Change the tops to bottoms and the bottoms to tops because I got that negative. So bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom is actually what I'm doing. You ready? Bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom. So there's 1 period. And remember I say hook it back? How do I do the second period? Well, the bottom that ended the first period, what was the last one, is now the first one. So where am I going to go? If the bottom there is already there, so bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom. Continue it on, and there's your second period. Does that make sense? Would you like me to do another one of those? Okay. I will do the one right to the left there. Again, radians, again, 2 periods. So let's see what we've got. Ooh, I forgot my domain and range. Going back, what's my domain here? All real numbers. What's my range here? -1 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 1. All right, moving over here. What's my amplitude? 1. What is the period? We're in radians. This one's really an ugly period, isn't it? Because it's 2 pi divided by pi over 2. Let's write that a different way. 2 pi divided by pi over 2 is really 2 pi times 2 over pi. So that gets me 4 pi over pi. So the pi ends up disappearing, and my period is just 4. I promise I don't give you one like that on the test. Okay? But it is ugly. Where is my midline? 1. So there's 1. I'm going to draw in that midline. Where am I going from there, above and below? So that's at 1. I'm going to be going up 1 from there. That puts me at 2. And down 1 from there, which is at 0. 0 is the only line we don't really have to label. All right, so I start off with 1, 2, 3, 4 lines out. And what do I label that 4th line? 4. Well, that's going to be easy to break up, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? So that second period is going to be easy too. 8, 6, 5, 7. That ends up breaking up very easily for us. Is this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the other? The other. So it's middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. Do I need to worry about flipping my T's and my B's at all? No. So I'm just going to start here and go middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. That's the first period. And then this one, the last one of the first period, becomes the first one of the second one. Middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. There's that second period. Okay. Questions there? Okay. Again, the way that period ends up being is kind of funky. I don't give you one that's funky like that on the test. All right, last two questions, which are also ones that people had trouble with on the test yesterday, or on the quiz yesterday. So, first thing that I want to identify in both of these is where is the midline? Actually, let me step back, as I'm all ready for that. I forgot domain and range here. What's my domain? What's my range? 0 is less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 2. Now let's get to our graphs here. Now the only thing that's different from these ones than the ones that were on your quiz is that the midline is not at 0. So how do I find the midline? Well, I have to figure out what's halfway from the top to the bottom. Well, if this is at 1 and this is at -5, let's try and find the halfway point. It looks like it's at -2. And if I draw a line there, I should be able to tell they're going up 3 and down 3. That is where the midline is. So that tells me that k is equal to -2 in this case. Questions about that? If k is -2, what does that tell me about the amplitude if it is going up 3 from there and down 3 from there? The amplitude is 3 because it's going up 3 and down 3. What other things do I need to know for my equation? I need to know what b is. I need to know if it is sine or cosine. Right? So let's look at this for a minute. At my y-axis, which should be the start of it, do I have a point in the middle or at the top of my range? Middle. What does that tell me about sine versus cosine? It's a sine graph because cosine starts at the top, right? Or technically the bottom. Now, because we've introduced those negative ones also, if I'm going middle, top, is that a positive sign or a negative sign? Positive, because what would it be if it was going middle, bottom, middle, top, middle? Negative sign, right? I'd have to put that negative in front there. Okay, so at this point, here's what I know. I know y equals 3 sine something theta, we don't know that yet, minus 2. My k value's out there. So I need to figure out what b is to put it right there, and then I'm done. And b is always the hardest one. So what I need to do is I need to find out how big one period is. So if this is a sine graph, one period is going to be middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. This is the end of the first period. Do you agree? What is that location? 2 pi. So if my period is 2 pi, how do you find the period in an equation? Don't you set 2 pi divided by b, and the result is the period, which in this case is 2 pi, sorry. What does b equal then in this case? B has to equal 1. So right here, I put 1 theta, which just looks like that. And that's my equation. Okay? All right. Last one here. What is my k value? What's my midline? 4. Looks pretty good. So k is 4. What's my... k is k. K is 4. What's my amplitude? 2, because it's going up 2 and down 2. Is this a sine or a cosine graph? How do you know? Because here at my y-axis, it's not starting in the middle. It's actually starting at the bottom, though. So what does that mean? It's not just cosine, it's negative cosine. So my equation is going to start off with y equals negative 2 cosine something theta plus 4. How do I find that something theta? Well, we're dealing in radians, aren't we? So 2 pi divided by b is equal to whatever 1 period is. What is 1 period here? Bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom. It's 6 pi. Hang on. So I'm going to multiply by b. That gives me 2 pi equals 6 pi b. So if I divide both sides by 6 pi, then b is equal to what? Pi's cancel and I have 1/3. So how do I write 1/3 theta? I write theta over 3. All right, happy studying.